Welcome to another deep dive today. You know we love to dig into some, well, let's say unexpected sources for wisdom.
That's right.
And today we're looking at P.T. Barnum's The Art of Money Getting from, wait for it, 1882.
Wow, 1882. That's going way back.
It is, and that's what makes this so fascinating. What can this, well, let's be honest, this showman, this promoter, teach us about money today?
Well, you might be surprised.
Exactly, so let's dive in.
Okay, so first we've got to set the stage. Barnum was writing during this just crazy time of change in America.
Right, like I was reading about it, and it's like the Industrial Revolution is booming.
Yeah.
Cities are exploding with people.
Yeah, massive growth. And to be honest, a lot of economic disparity.
Sound familiar?
Right. It's almost like he's writing for us today.
And Barnum, he just comes out swinging in this book. He says, and I'm quoting here, America was preeminently a country where fortunes may be made.
He really believed that, you know.
He did. He had this, like, unwavering faith in the American dream.
Right.
But then he hits us with this. He says that making money is one thing. Keeping it, that's the real challenge.
Keeping it is the test. And it's funny because, you know, Barnum, well, he actually filed for bankruptcy.
Multiple times.
Yeah, several times before he really hit it big.
So he wasn't just, like, talking the talk. He walked the walk.
Right. He had these financial struggles. He knew these pitfalls firsthand.
And I think that's what makes his advice so much more. It's like, it's real. It's not just theory. He's been there.
Exactly. He's battle-tested. And one of my favorite things he talks about is this idea of false economy.
Oh, yeah. That's where he, what does he say?
He says, saving at the spigot and wasting at the bunghole.
Ah, yes. The bunghole. Classic Barnum, right?
Yeah, he loved to use those vivid images.
But you know what? There's so much truth in that. He's talking about people who, like, obsess over these tiny little savings.
Right, like clipping coupons all day.
Exactly. But then they'll turn around and, like, blow their budget on something totally unnecessary.
You know, like buying a fancy car they can't afford.
Or that new gadget they just have to have.
Yeah. We all do it, right?
I think so. I mean, how many times have we thought, oh, I'm being so good, you know, packing my lunch, skipping that latte.
Right, but then we go and buy those concert tickets.
Totally. It's like we get so focused on the little things that we miss the big picture.
And it's not just about money either. This applies to everything. Time, energy, even relationships.
Oh, that's just it.
You could be like super efficient at work, but then totally neglect your family or your health. It's all about finding that balance.
Right.
Being mindful of where you're investing your resources, you know, not just saving for the sake of saving.
So it's like, it's not just about being frugal, it's about being smart.
Exactly.
And Barnum, he doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
He also warns us about, well, he calls it the Mrs. Grundy trap.
Ah, yes, Mrs. Grundy, the queen of keeping up with the Joneses.
Right. So who is Mrs. Grundy?
Well, she's like this, I don't know, this embodiment of societal pressure. She's always watching, judging.
Right. Like, what will the neighbors think?
Exactly. And Barnum says this can lead to awful financial choices.
I mean, think about it, right? We spend so much money on things just to impress others, to fit in.
Yeah. The clothes, the cars, the vacations.
It's like we're constantly performing for this imaginary audience.
And social media, forget about it.
Oh, yeah. That just makes it worse.
Totally. We're all trying to project this perfect image, even if it's totally fake.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really well with Barnum's next piece of advice, which is know yourself.
Know yourself. Know what you're good at.
And he actually says, I was never very much interested in mechanics. He, like, admits that he wasn't good with his hands.
Right, but he was a master showman. He knew how to entertain.
And that's what he focused on. He played to his strengths.
And I think that's so important, how many people are stuck in jobs they hate.
So many. Just because it's what they think they should do or because it's what their parents wanted.
Right, but what if they had the courage to follow their passion?
Even if it's risky, you know.
Exactly.
And that leads us to another one of Barnum's gems, which is all about location, location, location.
Oh, yeah, and he wasn't just talking about real estate.
Right. He was talking about everything. He had this great anecdote about a penny show in London, and it failed. Not because the show was bad, but because it was in the wrong spot.
But wasn't reaching the right audience.
Exactly. And he says, and I'm quoting again, it is better to have a good article, even a very common one, in a good location than a very extraordinary article in a poor one.
It makes sense, right? You could have the best product in the world.
The most amazing service.
But if you're not in the right place, you're not going to succeed.
And this applies to everything, right? From brick and mortar stores to online businesses.
Absolutely.
It's all about understanding your target audience and making sure you're reaching them where they are.
And speaking of things that can make or break your financial success, let's talk about debt.
Oh boy. Debt.
Now, Barnum had some strong opinions on this.
He did.
Remember, he went bankrupt.
A few times. He knew the dangers of debt firsthand.
And he called it, get this, working for a dead horse.
Working for a dead horse. That's a good one.
Yeah, he knew how easily debt could spiral out of control.
So wait, is he saying all debt is bad? Like, are we supposed to be terrified of credit cards and loans?
Well, not exactly. He actually makes a distinction between what he calls frivolous debt.
Frivolous debt.
Yeah, the kind that comes from, like, impulse buys or trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Okay.
And then there's strategic debt.
Ah, like investing in a property or a business.
Exactly.
So it's about being smart about debt, not just avoiding it altogether.
Right. Don't be afraid to use it to your advantage.
But always understand the risks involved.
And make sure it aligns with your long-term goals.
That makes sense. Be strategic, not impulsive.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Barnum's most, I think, inspiring principles. Perseverance.
Perseverance.
He really believed that was crucial, especially in a world that was changing so fast.
Right. He saw setbacks as opportunities to learn, to adjust your course, not as reasons to quit.
He was all about resilience and learning from your mistakes.
So it's not just about, like, gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's about having that growth mindset.
Exactly.
Barnum wasn't just focused on individual success. He also had some interesting thoughts about hiring and building a team.
Oh, yeah. He believed in finding employees who could think for themselves.
Not just follow orders, but actually contribute their ideas.
He tells this great story about a job applicant who just said, "My brain thinks."
My brain thinks.
And Barnum was like, "Hired."
That's amazing. And so relevant for today. I mean, in this knowledge economy, critical thinking is everything.
Totally. Problem solving, creativity, those are the skills that matter.
So he was way ahead of his time.
He was. And once you've got that amazing team, well, Barnum would say, make sure the world knows about it.
Of course. The master of promotion, the king of advertising.
Exactly. But his approach to advertising was interesting. He saw it as more than just flashy slogans or gimmicks.
Right.
He actually compared it to a farmer sowing seeds.
A farmer sowing seeds.
Yeah. He understood that it takes time, consistent effort to see results.
So, like, you can't just plant one seed and expect a whole field of crops.
Exactly. You've got to nurture those seeds, be patient and consistent.
And just like a farmer wouldn't plant bad seeds, Barnum believed in honesty in advertising.
He knew that building trust with your audience was key.
And this was long before the internet and social media, right?
Way before.
Yeah.
But he understood the power of reputation.
And word of mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even tells this story about an usher in his museum who wanted to fight a rude visitor.
Really?
And Barnum steps in, and he emphasizes that you have to treat even the most difficult customers with respect.
Wow.
It's about thinking long-term, building those relationships.
Yeah.
Understanding that a happy customer is more valuable than a quick sale.
So he was really advocating for what we now call customer relationship management, like over a century ago.
Exactly.
And this really highlights, I think, one of the most fascinating things about Barnum. He balanced these shrewd business practices with a genuine concern for treating people well.
He did. It's this mix of, pragmatism and idealism.
Yeah. It's really intriguing.
So getting back to Barnum and his art of money getting, one thing that really stood out to me was how much he talked about time management.
Yeah, he was big on being systematic, organized, really thought you should have a time for everything, even like fun stuff.
Exactly. He thought if you're, efficient and organized, you'll actually have more time for the things you enjoy.
And isn't that funny? Like today, it seems like we're always rushing, always trying to do a million things at once.
Right. Always on, always connected.
And are we really more productive that way? I'm not so sure.
Barnum, I think, he definitely have something to say about our obsession with smartphones and notifications. He even warned against being, too visionary.
What do you mean?
Like, chasing every new idea without really building something solid first.
Right. He talks about people who are always in hot water, always under the harrow because they jump from one thing to the next.
Right. Never finding stability. Never really building that foundation.
And that's something else that's so relevant today. He was a big believer in staying informed. He even said, and this is a famous quote, "He who is without a newspaper is cut off from his species."
Wow. Strong words.
But, obviously he didn't have the internet. But the point still stands, right?
Absolutely. We need to be aware of what's happening in the world, to understand the trends, the events that are shaping everything.
But I mean, today it's like we're drowning in information. It's hard to know what to pay attention to.
All right. There's so much noise, so much clickbait.
So it's almost like Barnum's advice is even more important now. We have to be careful about our sources.
Yeah, find those voices that are actually trustworthy, that provide, accurate and insightful information.
Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Totally. And, one thing I thought was really interesting, especially today, with how crazy the markets are, is his take on speculation.
Oh, yeah. He was pretty cautious about that, wasn't he?
He was, especially for people who were already successful in their field. He'd seen so many get tempted by those, get-rich-quick schemes and then lose everything.
He has this story about, like, a successful businessman who gets lured into speculation. And he ends up neglecting his actual business, the thing that was actually working.
And of course, it all falls apart.
It's a classic tale, right? The allure of easy money.
It's hard to resist, but Barnum's message is clear. Stick to your strengths.
Yeah.
Focus on what you know.
Don't get distracted by every shiny opportunity that comes along.
And speaking of risky ventures, he also had some pretty strong warnings about endorsing other people's schemes.
Oh, yeah, like co-signing loans?
Exactly. He tells this really sad story about a guy who keeps endorsing his friend's notes.
Because he trusts him.
Right. Thinks it's a sure thing. But things go bad, and the guy ends up ruined.
It's a good reminder that even with people we trust, we have to be careful when it comes to money.
Set boundaries. Don't let emotions cloud our judgment.
Now, this one might sound a little harsh, but Barnum also believed that starting a business with, like, inherited wealth or borrowed money was a bad idea.
He thought those first dollars you earn, no matter how small, were the most valuable.
Because they teach you about hard work.
Right. Sacrifice. Managing your money responsibly.
It's like you appreciate it more if you've earned it yourself.
And then, once you've built that solid foundation, Barnum would say, go ahead and shout it from the rooftops.
Right. He was all about advertising, letting the world know what you've got to offer.
He saw it as essential for any business, big or small, and he had such a creative approach.
Oh, tell me about it. He tells this story about a store owner who put up a sign that said, "Don't read the other side."
And of course, everyone had to go read the other side.
I love it.
He was a master at capturing attention, sparking curiosity.
He would have been amazing at social media marketing.
Oh, totally. But beyond those, clever tactics, he always stressed the importance of treating customers with respect.
Politeness, making them feel valued.
He saw it as an investment, just as important as advertising or a prime location.
And he really believed in it. Remember that story about the usher who wanted to fight a rude museum visitor?
Yeah. And Barnum steps in and basically says, we need to keep this customer happy.
It's all about that long-term thinking, right? Building relationships.
Exactly. A happy customer is more likely to come back and tell their friends.
So we see this theme again with Barnum, right? He was this savvy businessman, but he also cared about doing right by people.
And that, I think, is what makes his advice so interesting. He was this mix of pragmatism and idealism.
Now, something else I found surprising, he was actually a big advocate for philanthropy.
He was, but not in a, showy, look-at-me kind of way.
He believed in helping those who were willing to help themselves.
Empowering people to improve their own lives.
It's a really interesting perspective, especially coming from a guy who's known for, being a showman.
Right. And he also advised against, boasting about your wealth or, sharing all your business secrets.
He valued discretion, humility.
He thought those were important qualities.
It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words. Let your success, your generosity, speak for itself.
And that leads us to what he considered the most important trait of all. Integrity.
Integrity.
He valued it above everything else, even said that making money dishonestly was actually the hardest way to do it.
Because eventually it catches up with you.
Your reputation gets tarnished. People lose trust.
So he's saying that being ethical is not just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
In the long run, absolutely.
So it seems like Barnum's idea of success wasn't just about money.
It was about living an honorable life, contributing to your community, using your resources to make a positive impact.
And he even recognized that, a lot of wealthy people are actually miserable.
Because they're lacking those other things, the relationships, the purpose, the feeling that they're making a difference.
So he had a very holistic view of success.
He did. And here's a really thought-provoking idea. He actually believed that money getters, the people who build successful businesses, were often benefactors of society.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He argued that commerce and trade were engines of progress, and that the wealthiest individuals often funded things like schools and hospitals and libraries.
So he was making a case for, like, the positive role that capitalism can play.
He was. He acknowledged that there are downsides, but he also saw the potential for good.
He even said that the history of money getting is the history of civilization.
It's a bold statement,
Mm-hmm.
but it reflects his belief that the pursuit of wealth, when done ethically, can actually drive innovation and make the world a better place.
It's definitely a different way of looking at things, and it makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It challenges us to consider our own relationship with money, with success, and with the impact we want to have.
You know, as we wrap up our look at Barnum's The Art of Money Getting, it's amazing how much of what he said still applies today.
Right. I mean, it's been, over 140 years?
It really is incredible how relevant some of his advice still is.
Yeah.
Like, even in the age of, the internet and cryptocurrency and all that.
Totally. I mean, he was writing about, candles and horse-drawn carriages, but his insights into, human nature and business, it's like they're timeless.
Yeah, he just had this knack for understanding, what makes people tick, what drives us to succeed.
Definitely. And sure, some of his methods, they might seem a little outdated.
A little bit.
But the underlying principles, they're still gold.
Like, for example, his emphasis on honesty.
Right. He really believed that having a reputation for integrity was, crucial. And in today's world, with social media and everything, that's more important than ever.
Oh, yeah. One bad review can go viral and, ruin a business.
Exactly. Consumers are so much more informed now, they can see right through you if you're not being genuine.
So building a brand on trust, on transparency, it's essential.
Totally. And another thing that's so relevant is his focus on perseverance.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
We live in such a, instant gratification culture now. We want everything right away.
But Barnum, he understood that real success takes time.
It takes effort. It takes being willing to push through the tough times.
He didn't believe in quitting at the first sign of trouble.
And he didn't see setbacks as failures. He saw them as, opportunities to learn, to grow, to adjust your course.
So it's that resilience that really matters.
It is. It's that grit.
And, we can't forget his emphasis on providing value.
Right. He believed that the most successful businesses are the ones that are actually meeting a need, solving a problem.
Serving their customers well. It wasn't just about, making a profit.
It was about making a difference.
And that brings us back to that really interesting idea that we talked about before. That, money getters, entrepreneurs, those folks can actually be benefactors to society.
Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective.
He argued that commerce and trade, they drive progress.
And that often the wealthiest individuals are the ones who fund, schools, hospitals, all those things that benefit everyone.
So he was really making a case for the positive role that capitalism can play.
He was. He saw both the good and the bad, of course.
But he definitely believed that a strong economy could lift people up, create opportunities.
It's a really complex and nuanced perspective, and it definitely makes you think.
It does. And, as we kind of wrap things up here, I think one of the biggest takeaways from Barnum, for me at least, is that he was such a fascinating character.
Hello, definitely. Full of contradictions.
Yeah, he was this showman, this master of hype. But he also had this deep understanding of human nature and this genuine desire to do good, to help people.
Right. It's was he a brilliant marketer who just happened to have a good heart? Or was he a genuinely good person who used his marketing skills to achieve his goals?
It's a question that's still worth pondering, I think, even after all this time.
I agree. And, I think that's what makes him so enduring. We're still talking about him, over a century later.
Exactly. And that, to me, is the mark of a truly interesting and impactful figure, someone who makes us think, who challenges our assumptions, who leaves us with more questions than answers.
That's a great point. And I think, whether you agree with all of his methods or not, you can't deny that Barnum had a huge impact on American culture and business.
He did. And his legacy, it continues to shape the way we think about, success and money and even ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so valuable to revisit his work, to see what we can still learn from him today, to see how his insights can, maybe guide us on our own path to success.
And with that, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of P.T. Barnum.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
A fascinating journey through history and, some surprisingly relevant advice.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into, well, you never know where we'll end up next. So stay tuned.